Good morning, or is it afternoon yet? Thank you, everybody. I'm here to talk about going beyond the labels of healthcare and thinking about patients as scientists and inventors and more. But I'm going to tell a story that I've never told before in public. And for context, you need to understand that I grew up in Alabama. I'm from Huntsville, Alabama. And the reason this matters is because I am the youngest of 3 kids. I have 2 older brothers. And when I was little, my siblings played a lot of soccer and baseball and all the sports. And so as the youngest, guess who went to the ball field with them? I did. And because this was Alabama, it was summer and hot and incredibly humid. So the ultimate treat for a kid stuck at the ball field for hours and hours, multiple days, all the time, what it felt like, was a cup of crushed ice. Now this was amazing. A quarter crushed ice. It was the best thing because it would take one of those nasty hot juice boxes and make it the most delicious treat. Now, when I was younger, my parents would buy it for me. And as I got older, let's say 3 or 4, they continued to give me the quarter it would take to buy the crushed ice. But they wanted me to start learning how to ask for things myself. So I would go up to the counter with them, but I would have to order it. And as I got older, they would stand back and I'd have to go up there to the concession stand by myself to order the crushed ice. Now, sometimes I didn't feel like talking to people and I didn't get my crushed ice if I didn't go up to the concession stand myself. But other times I did. And this was a fundamental experience for me growing up, not just because I got crushed ice and that was cool, but because later when I became a patient, I realized that that was one of the fundamental behaviors that allowed me to succeed and get what I needed as a patient. Because oftentimes what you don't realize until you become a patient is it's like being diagnosed and being struck by lightning. You have no way to prepare for what's happening. You just have to deal with it. And you don't know what to do, and you're just struggling with figuring out every hour, and some days minutes and days ahead, and trying to figure out what on earth are you going to be able to do. And in the case of diabetes, for me, it was incredibly hard. Because the tools that I had over the years, they were helpful, and they were better than what I had than when I was diagnosed in 2002, but they weren't perfect. For example, my continuous glucose monitor, that would tell me what my blood sugar is every 5 minutes. Well, I had a couple of problems with these devices. Number one, getting the data off this thing was hard. In 2013, when my doctor asked me to bring in some of my data, I wasn't sure how to do it. Because in 2013, the FDA-approved software for my medical device to get my data off was for PC, and I had a Mac. So the only way I could get my data was to pull out my iPhone and snap a picture of the receiver, send it to my computer, copy and paste it into an Excel. And I handed that to my doctor. It was really frustrating. But my other frustration with my medical devices was the fact that I couldn't hear the alarms on my CGM. So after a couple of years, I went to the concession stand for myself as a patient, and I reached out to the manufacturers and said, can't we make these louder alarms? Can we make different alarms? Can we do something? And the answers I got back were really, really frustrating. I was told it's loud enough for most people, which was obviously not the case. I was told it was a trade-off in battery life. I was told they were working on it and it would come out in the next release years away. And I really wasn't okay with that. And I thought, if only I could get my data off my device. I know exactly what I can do. I can use my phone to make louder sounds. But remember how hard it was to get off my data? It was impossible, so I didn't think I could do anything. But thanks to social media, that changed in 2013, when I saw a tweet by John Kostick that showed how he was able to get his son's blood sugars from the continuous glucose monitor and into the cloud. And I reached out for him and asked him, would you be willing to share your code with me? And he said yes. And that enabled me to build a louder alarm system that went from just being loud alarms to smart predictive alarms, and ultimately ended up being an open loop system that was amazing. And through the course of sharing about this, because I thought it was really cool, we met other people like Ben West, who you might have heard from last year, who had spent years figuring out how to communicate with my insulin pump. And because of that, it turns out we were able to build an artificial pancreas with the same kind of stuff we had sitting around our house. When you take my existing continuous glucose monitor and my existing insulin pump, and you add a small computer and a radio stick and a battery, you end up with an artificial pancreas. It wasn't that hard in retrospect. And this system is absolutely life-changing. And because I had used open source code to build it, it was a no-brainer to turn around and make this open source. And that's how OpenAPS came to be. It's a movement and an open and transparent effort to make more of this technology available to whoever wants it. Now, in 2015, when we launched OpenAPS, I thought, if 1 or 2 people uses this, it'd be worth it to make it open source. I'm blown away to know that there's over 400 people worldwide using various types of this technology. And that's significant because we as a community have over 2 million hours of patient experience. But guess who's using this data other than patients? Not the manufacturers, not healthcare providers, nobody's looking at it. And so this year I decided to change that, and I created the OpenAPS Data Commons to allow people who are DIYing their diabetes to donate their data for research, but not just traditional academic researchers, but also to enable other patients to begin to research the data. Now, as the OpenAPS community has grown, we've had a lot of opportunities like this to be able to share our stories. And I was really proud last year to be able to bring together a panel of OpenAPS users at the Quantified Self Public Health Conference. And there were 8 individuals who shared the stage with me and talked about their experiences. And this panel had an incredible ripple effect that I was surprised by. There was a researcher who came up to me afterwards, Eric Heckler from Arizona State University, and he asked me, you talked about the experience of research and it not being optimal, but I want to ask you, what could we do differently? You've accomplished a lot. The community has accomplished a lot, and you're obviously growing and you're achieving some amazing things. You built an artificial pancreas. Who does that? But what would happen if you could collaborate with traditional researchers and provide resources? What could you possibly do? And that started a series of conversations with him and other collaborators like Eric Johnston from Arizona State University. And we put together a project that is going to answer this question: how can we scale what we've done in diabetes? And this project is going to be called Opening Pathways for Discovery, Research, and Healthcare. And this is significant because as a patient, I am principal investigator of this project, and this project is going to be supported with a grant from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And that project starts today. Thank you. There's a couple of components of this project. The first is we are building an on-call data science team with resources from Arizona State University to allow patients in the diabetes community to begin to answer the long list of questions we have about diabetes. And this is significant because we know the data is there, 2 million hours worth of data. And we are going to start prioritizing the research agenda when the traditional ecosystem won't. And we're also going to be analyzing the process of research itself and the barriers that we patients, we people doing untraditional research, are facing, because that's significant and we need to be able to address those up front. And we're also going to identify the gaps in resources for all patients, with the goal at the end of this project of being super transparent along the way. The resources will be open source, but the goal will be so that other patients in other patient communities outside of diabetes will be able to leverage some of the same processes that we've built in the diabetes community. Now, I get a lot of pushback for being a patient researcher, and trust me, you don't want to be the person who makes me make this face at my computer screen. It happens a lot, surprisingly. Maybe not to the people in this room, but I get pushback all the time on the internet and at non-traditional conferences saying, well, but you're not a researcher. You're not a scientist. You're not a this, you're not a that. And that's so frustrating because no, we're not traditional in the sense that engineering, programming, researching is not my day job. Most patients, that's not their day job. They have different careers. But that doesn't mean we patients, we people living with these diseases are not engineering. We are engineering, we are developing, we are doing science, we are researching, and we are inventing things that change the way healthcare is going to be done and the way that we live our lives. It's significant. And so we really need to move away from the traditional mindset of thinking about everybody in their box and their traditional roles, because the traditional mindset takes too long. When the traditional healthcare ecosystem says, we're going to build a car, well, they design the car and say, okay, in 5 years, we'll bring it to market. Well, guess how much the world changes? Guess how much technology changes and knowledge changes in 5 years? That's really significant. But also think about, what is the problem that the car is supposed to solve? The car is a solution, but the problem is, how do I get from point A to point B without having to walk? How can I do it more quickly? And so the patient community, us non-traditional researchers and scientists and innovators, we look at it and say, I would love to have a car. I don't have the resources or the knowledge right now, but I know somebody who can help me build a skateboard. And maybe I can progress to having a scooter and a bike. And hey, maybe we'll end up with a car, which is great. It goes really fast. It has air conditioning. Maybe it'll be self-driving one day. But the process of collaborating and partnering together means that what we've learned in the process is incredibly valuable, and that knowledge should not be ignored. And so that's my challenge to you, is to think outside of the box, think beyond the labels of traditional healthcare. Think about how you cannot wait anymore to change healthcare. We're not waiting because we can't afford to wait any longer. So why are you? Thank you.